Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors, members of the public, if there are any, and the press. Welcome. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. The recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting your personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. So, welcome to the Communities meeting this afternoon. Conscious the last night's meeting went on to pretty late time, so I want to be pretty strict with the timings this evening and allocate between 15 and 20 minutes per substantive item. So keep your comments as brief as possible so we can move on. So I want to try to give as many people the opportunity to speak as well. Agenda item 1, do we have any appointment of substitutes? Thank you. Any declarations of interest from the room? Can't see anything, Julian. And public participation? No. No. And if we move on to the minutes of the last meeting, please. Go page by page. Page 1, any comments? No. Page 2, any comments? Page 3, any comments? And that's it. So those are deemed accurate and for the purposes of the last meeting. Okay, and then we move on to agenda item 5, which is Freedom Leisure Contract Year 9 Annual Report. I believe, Alan, are you introducing this item? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've got Rob Tyler from Freedom Leisure here this evening. Rob is the area manager, so I'm not going to steal Rob's thunder in that respect because he's prepared a PowerPoint presentation to talk you through the performance for contract year 9. I just did want to pick up the information in the back of the report that was written for committee, just to confirm to members the kind of process in terms of monitoring of the contract. So the last 4 kind of bullet points there just outlines the fact that I am in regular kind of contact with the Freedom Leisure team in terms of operational issues. We meet on a quarterly basis to look at performance. We also, as a result of the COVID pandemic, meet on a monthly basis for finance review, open book meetings on that basis, and that's at a kind of high director level. And the final point I just wanted to touch on was the fact that this is reporting on contract year 9, but we are now in a position from January where we've got the contract extension agreed for a further 5 years to cover the period 1st of January 2026 to the 31st of December 2030. On that note, I'll hand over to Rob.
Thanks, Alan. So welcome, Rob, to the meeting as well.
Just wait for the presentation to come up on the screen. Okay, it's nice to see everybody again, and I say the same thing every year, how quickly has the last 12 months gone. So I'll begin by just starting on, if you could just go to the next slide, that'd be great. Freedom Leisure, just I'm sure everybody is aware, but a bit more of a background about Freedom Leisure and who we are as an organisation. So Freedom Leisure is a UK leading not-for-profit charitable leisure trust. We now operate over 130 leisure facilities throughout the UK. When we took on the Worcester contract, I think we had around 34 sites at the time, so we've grown considerably since then. and especially recently across this region where we've taken on contracts in the Gloucestershire area and the Cotswolds. As a leisure trust, our profits are reinvested back into the communities that we serve. Our ambition is to engage and deliver transformational programmes to those communities, and in particular underrepresented targeted groups. And Freedom Leisure, we feel that we're well positioned to support local health improvements. Next slide, please. And onto the financial performance covering last financial year, so ending in March earlier this year. As you can see, the income was at £4.275 million, and we were ahead of our bid commitment by £500,000. So it was a really strong performance in terms of income generation. The pressure that we've had, you might struggle to see it on the screen there, is the expenditure. The expenditure was £600,000 above where we thought we would be, which is really just driven by the cost of utilities, consecutive years of high increases to the national living wage, and NIC contributions and other cost pressure issues. But thankfully, we were able to get to a break-even position. Included within the accounts was a management fee we paid directly to the council of last year of £792,000. Included within the accounts that you can see were the utility costs of £479,000. The implications of the tariffs compared to 2022, so prior to the increases, we saw an additional £255,000 compared to that year. Thankfully, we did achieve last year a reduction on utilities of £63,000. That was through consumption driven down, housekeeping measures, and also some better rates, market rates. And thankfully and gratefully received financial support was provided by the Worcester City Council for £184,000, which has really contributed towards those utility costs and have helped us get to a break-even position, and we're really thankful for that. The membership base increased by 299 over the course of the year, and we were operating at the end of March at our highest level since the pandemic, so we were proud of that achievement. Next slide, please. I thought it was worthwhile just to put a slide on here just to show the challenges that the whole sector are facing. And this is Swim England data. Swim England are our national governing body for swimming. And I just felt it was important to share with you some of the challenges that are being experienced throughout the UK at the moment. So with increasing financial pressures, ageing facilities, and rising operational costs, many pools and leisure centres are at risk of closure, leaving communities without vital space for physical activity and social connection. Analysis has revealed that 76% of the public water space lost in the last 15 years has disappeared since 2020, highlighting the escalating crisis that the sector is that we're facing. 500 pools have been lost since 2010, a massive 35,000 square metres of water space. And really worryingly, on the bottom slide is 30% of children in year 7 and are unable to swim 25 metres competently. So it's not all doom and gloom, because I feel that we're the opposite to sort of what we're seeing on the screen, which goes back to the partnership work that we've had over the years. And I'll come on now to the next slide around the data for swimming of the last sort of 12 months or so. So the number one at the top, there were, at the end of March, 2,407 children and adults on our Learn to Swim programme having weekly lessons. We've grown by 1,700 since the start of the new PERD as well, back in 2017. Over 4,000 25-metre badges have been issued to primary age school children that have taken part in lessons at PERD as well. We've got 24 schools currently taking part in term time lessons with us. One we're really proud of is last year we delivered half lessons within PERD as well. So half is our holiday activity and food programme. So it's really there to support children from low-income families during holiday periods with physical activity and a meal. So we secured grant funding to be able to deliver that programme throughout the year. 73 attended, and we'll be looking to obtain more funding moving forward. We've continued to provide free swimming to all members of swimming lessons, whether you're an adult or a child, outside of the weekly lessons, and we've committed to doing that for the year ahead as well. The over 75 annual swim membership was frozen last year. So those over 75 that wish to swim could pay £20 for the entire year and have unlimited swimming. So we've had 106 members benefit from that. And we have put an increase on the over 75s, but just by £6 for the year ahead. And hopefully that will be well received. We've delivered SEND weekly swimming lessons. We've got 24 members on the programme currently, and attendance of 285 over the year. Next slide, please. Memberships, again, we gained 299 over the course of the year. We've actually increased the membership now by over 2,000 since the start of our partnership. PERD as well were awarded winners of Membership of the Year and Leisure Centre of the Year across the Freedom Organisation last year, so that was a nice achievement for the team. Next slide, please. Participation data, we saw a 4% increase compared to the previous year, seeing 26,000 extra visits. Across the contract, the leisure contract was 722,000 visits. We deliver over 160 weekly group exercise classes, and we've seen increases of 65% compared to year one of the contract in terms of participation. Next slide, please. This is a bit of the area insight of how we're doing across Worcestershire. And I won't go through all of them, but 23% of adults are not currently reaching the recommended weekly activity expected of 150 minutes. This number has actually improved, and we're doing better than the national average when you compare. 64% of adults are currently overweight or obese. 35% of children are classified as overweight, with 11% of children living in low-income families. And 1 in 3 people over the age of 65 had a fall within the year, and 1 in 2 over the age of 85. I think we had 2,355 falls across the Worcestershire over the previous year. So that was data there provided by Sport England through the Active Life survey. What I wanted to just touch on now is what we're trying to do locally to improve that within our facilities. Next slide, please. So with everything we do, we try to work closely with partners locally, but also nationally, co-designing projects and programmes aimed to improve the lives of our residents. And here are just a few of the organisations, not all, that we try to work with. Next slide, please. And I'll pick out a few on here, some achievements in numbers for us. So these are very much what we see as underrepresented groups. These aren't the typical going to the gym, swimming lessons, and so on. So for us, this is why we exist as an organisation. We've seen 1,600 of our memberships have been issued to support low-income households. 1,339 of our memberships are registered to the top ranked 3 IMD areas. We've delivered 180 community sessions outside of our leisure facilities, such as open parks, such as priority ward areas, working alongside the Worcester Community Trust as an example there. Next slide, please. Targeted health and wellbeing. We signed the Stay Connected pledge, and by signing that, we've committed ourselves to creating a welcoming environment, an inclusive environment for everybody, reducing the stigma associated with loneliness. We've delivered 1,600 health-targeted projects, such as postnatal programs, such as weight management, just to name two. We've had over 2,000 participants in our SEND programs, over 3,000 participants in our early years programs, supporting the best start in life, such as Saturdads, Soft Play, Mini Splash and Postnatal. And we connected with the Dementia Action Alliance and became Dementia Friends, and several colleagues have gone through the training there. We've also upskilled members of the team in menopause, cancer rehabilitation, exercise referral and more. Next slide, please. We've had 1,403 visits to adapted exercise, again, just to show that we are in inclusive facilities. Over 2,500 visits to walking sports. So that's netball, football, tennis, cricket, basketball. And actually, I was reading through some of the data earlier, and there's been a real shift in the older demographic taking part in activity. We're seeing some good improvements there. And that is definitely one I think we could be proud of. 6,500 participants in terms of youth sport provision, multi-sports within the city. And we've continued to deliver multi-sports throughout the contract term, providing free activity throughout the city during the holiday periods. And we've also delivered sessions with the Worcester Community Trust in areas where there are financial barriers and travel issues as a barrier. 200 plus meals have been provided to those accessing free school meals through the HAF programme. We spoke earlier about the summer lessons, but we've also delivered holiday camps as well, and that is one we're really passionate about continuing with. And 700 have taken part in the refugee support programme that we worked on with you as the council. Another one we are proud of. Next slide, please. Okay, so Summer Quest, this was launched last year in partnership with the District Collaborative, On-Side Advocacy, Worcester City Council, Action for Children. And really the programme was designed at families, looking at specifically children between 0 and 5. And it was really trying to bring the community together. We provided a range of different activities over the course of the summer, from bug hunts to encourage curiosity and exploration in nature. We've delivered multi-sports, play sessions, creating that social interaction. We provided access to local museums, and there was, the outcomes were 115 registered families, 446 children participated, and challenge downloads was 3,299. And a lot of the rewards, they range from tickets to the safari park and free swimming at Perth as well. So well, there was lots more than that. We have shared a case study and happily do that again. Next slide, please. Tennis. We continue to deliver the 15 hours of free weekly tennis, as we always have them throughout the tennis contract. We saw an increase of over 2,000 additional participants with free tennis compared to the previous year. In addition to the standardised free tennis that we deliver weekly, we were thrilled to celebrate the success of Serving Up Free Tennis, which we saw a 94% success rate on the courts that were available to members of the community. And again, another thank you for the council in terms of the partnership work there and ultimately paying for the courts. And hopefully we played our part with the promotion and so on. And I think earlier this year, the numbers were just as good, if not better. We delivered our multi-sports programs from the parks as well. So that gave children the opportunity to take part in tennis on the courts, and equipment wasn't a barrier. And we continued to deliver our walk-in tennis program. And as you can see on the screen, we've actually just installed 4 pickleball courts, following lots of feedback that we've had from the leisure centres and how busy they are, and they wanted to get outside. So not quite the right time of year in terms of going into the winter months, but we're ready to go, and especially from April onwards, I'm sure we will be very busy for pickleball. Next slide, please. So we do care about the environment. As I said earlier, we saw a £64,000 reduction in our utility costs. At Purd as well, we saw £55,000. There was a reduction of 16.6% on our electricity. Really, we got there through lots of good housekeeping measures. Gas was over, unfortunately, by 15% compared to the previous year. Gas can vary depending on the weather, the customer use of the facilities. And going back to what I said earlier, we have seen an increase of 4% in participation, and I think perhaps we're seeing some of the usage there creep up. But we're really pleased at Purd as well. We've now got the solar installed across the pool and the sports hall, so we're seeing some good data there. And we are looking forward to putting up LED lighting in the sports hall in December. So that's soon to come. Next slide, please. St John's pretty much maintained the same as the previous year. The savings that we made in electricity were sort of balanced out with the gas. But on a positive, moving into this year ahead, we've just had the solar installed at St John's Sports Centre. So we're looking forward to seeing the impact that will have. Next slide, please. Nunnery Woods, we saw a 6.5% reduction in partnership with our joint use partners. We've been able to reduce consumption there, which is pleasing. And the next slide, please. Promise there's just a couple more to go. I know you've got a long agenda. Quest here, so we maintained our status at Purd as well as Quest Excellent. So Quest, as a reminder, is widely recognised as industry standard benchmark for leisure facilities in the UK. It evaluates various aspects of performance and how we're delivering for the customers. And it was really pleasing to see we maintained our excellent banding there across key areas such as swimming lessons, community, and customer service, just to name 3. Next slide, please. And finally, we're really looking forward to the refurbishments that we've got coming underway within the next couple of weeks, actually. So we're all really busy getting ready for the Purd as well, and St John's Sports Centre fitness refurbishments, where we'll have brand new fitness equipment installed in those fitness suites. And finally, again, thank you for everything that the Council have done for Freedom Leisure over the contract so far. You're certainly one of our most favourite local authorities, and actually, personal thanks to Alan for his continued support over the years. There's been some very challenging times, and I said I wouldn't talk too much about the pandemic, but it wasn't so long ago that we had that, and then we had the energy crisis and cost of living and lots of other things. But Alan and the directors and everybody else have been really supportive throughout that time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Rob, for that comprehensive report. But I won't comment just yet, but I'll open it up to the floor. Got Councillor Wilmore, Sarah, Mace, Amos and Lawrenson.
Thanks. I've got 2 questions, if I may. One's sort of a bit macro, one's micro. With the social participation data, so the 1,600 concession memberships, and particularly those targeted in I can't get my words out, IMD1, do you have any data on the utilisation of that membership? So they might have the membership, but are these people been able to access it on a regular basis? Because I'm just wondering if there are hidden barriers there that we're not maybe capturing.
Yep, great question, and I believe we can see the data in terms of the usage. We can certainly see the membership and the location and how frequent they are using our facilities. I certainly feel that there is more we can do in partnership around active travel, and that's something that we're really happy to support with. But yeah, we can certainly pull together some data for you actually, and yeah, that would be certainly interesting to see.
Thanks. So my second question, which was a bit more specific, it was around the usage of Nunnery Wood Sports Centre, because it was the only sports centre that showed quite a marked decrease in attendance, particularly for exercise classes. It has always been the poor cousin of the sports centres compared to St John's and Purd as well. But if the fitness class fees are going up by 4.7%, it said in our report, which I know you don't have sight of at the moment, that classes remain very popular across the 3 leisure centres, but that's not really borne out by the data that shows quite a marked reduction in attendance at Nunnery. So I'm just wondering, are there any measures in place to stop the sort of disparity between attendance and facilities at the other 2 leisure centres compared to Nunnery?
Okay, good question, put me on the spot. So the positive, and I wish I'd have pulled off the Q1 and Q2 reports so far this year, we have seen an increase compared to what we delivered there, which is a real positive. So we've changed a few of the classes, listening to sort of customer feedback. We have delivered meet the manager sessions up at Nunnery Wood, where the centre manager met with the customers and hopefully made some positive changes there. I know they put in some additional body pump classes and spin, so the usage is certainly improving. So we are confident, but across the 3 centres, classes have been thriving. And one of the bonuses about being a member at Nunnery Wood is you also get access to classes at St John's Sports Centre as well. And quite often customers take the opportunity to utilise those classes at St John's because of the opening hours are obviously greater than at Nunnery Wood. So we are going to keep trying and keep trying to drive things forward, and really listening to our customers as much as possible. Hopefully that answered some of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say it's nice to see that the solar panels that went into Purd as well, in particular, seem to be delivering savings in your energy usage. But am I right in thinking that those panels only went in sort of halfway through the year or partway through the year? Are we expecting that those savings, those energy usage reductions should continue next year?
Yep, another great question. The solar installation came much later in the year, so we haven't really seen the benefit in those accounts in terms of consumption. So the work we saw there was very much around housekeeping measures. And I'm glad you asked this one because I thought somebody would, so I made a note of it. So year to date, Purd as well are actually achieving a 33% reduction compared to the previous year. So that's April through to September on electricity. And out of that 33%, 55% is a result of the solar. So it's going well, which can only be a good thing for the next sort of 5 years and beyond. So we're really happy with that. And obviously we've got the solar being installed now, well, within the last week at St John's as well.
Thank you. Councillor Kinnersley, can I apologise for mistaking you for Councillor? Is that right? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Handley, I wanted to build on the question from my colleague there. So thinking of the solar panels, so you've talked about the benefits they've been delivering so far. Presumably you've got forecasts of what they're going to deliver in future years and beyond, and have those benefits been built into your costing systems and feeding through into the proposed fees? Thank you.
Okay, and another great question. Certainly, we're due to finish this initial 10-year contract at the end of December, but our bid commitment for the next 5 years has been based on the investment with the solar panels. So that's been built into the contract agreement. So yeah, certainly.
Can I thank you for that. Can I also ask about, particularly thinking of the gas and the areas that aren't covered by the solar panels, have you, I know in the past you've looked at green tariffs, just to say, is that something that you continue to look at, just for any, energy?
Yeah, absolutely. Within the last couple of years, we've strengthened our management team. We've taken on additional colleagues across the business that are really focusing on those. What else can we do on top of what we've already done? So hopefully more will be coming. And coming up within the next month, we'll be installing LED lighting to the sports hall lights at Purd as well. And that's just an example of what's coming up in the short term. But there's lots of other things that we can do, for sure.
Yes, I was thinking in terms of energy tariffs from your suppliers, but is that what you meant?
Sorry, no, I obviously didn't understand the question because I answered it in a completely other way. Yeah, so I'll need to come back to you on the exact terms of the energy tariffs, but I know they're always being looked at by our procurement team, but I don't have the data on me this evening. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Chair. Just, if I may, just one comment and one question. First of all, the comment. When you refer to the old demographic, I think you looked at me. So just to make sure. But the point. Older demographic. Well, no, you do. It was the contemporaneous nature. You saying the older demographic, then you looking at me and smiling. I thought, well, but anyway, the point I'm making is that you mentioned in that the concept of social isolation, getting older people out and about doing something, and as a consequence of social isolation being a huge problem. So all I would say on that is keep up the good work on that, because I think social isolation, certainly from my experience, is a real problem. And just getting elderly people out doing something, or socialising, or some kind of exercise, it doesn't really matter. It's very important to their mental health and their whole well-being. So congratulations on that and keep up the good work. The question was obesity, and I'm glad you didn't look at me when you mentioned that. But the figure, frankly, is alarming. What I saw there. Now, obviously, obesity, as far as I know, has two causes: exercise and diet. And obviously, you're not responsible for both of those. And obviously, you are aware of it, and you're trying to do something about it. But to what extent do you work with, and I know this is very difficult, work with parents? Because clearly, I mean, the secondary cause of obesity, or the main cause, is, I don't know which is which, is diet. And that really does fall on the shoulders of parents. Obviously, you're doing a good job by getting kids to do some exercise and trying not to let them get obese. Because the problem that I understand it is that obviously once a child is obese, that's going to go into adulthood, and there's not much you can't really reverse it. You can, but it doesn't get reversed. So really, the question is, to narrow it down, what work do you do with parents, if any, in terms of obesity and children in particular? And also, do you work with any other groups in terms of mental? I'm principally talking about health authorities on the question of diet, because diet and the exercise are linked. Although I don't hold you responsible for that, but really just a question of whether you work with them as a kind of rounded exercise.
It's a really good question. And yeah, certainly you can't run off a bad diet, and I've been trying to do that for a number of years. But actually, I think there's more we can do in terms of children especially. Quite a lot of our focus has been around adults and adults using our gym. We do weight management boot camps, and we really educate those customers around the importance of eating healthily and what that means. So hopefully that then can be translated through to their children and sort of beyond. But we have a big audience actually through social media, through our app that we've got, and I think we could do more at relaying those health messages. One of the focuses that we're looking at the moment with our plans moving forward is having healthier food choices within our cafe facility, so a specific area where it's designed for healthier food options. But it is a balance between driving the commercials, but also really importantly that we've got to get that bit right, because if we don't, then the NHS will continue to be overwhelmed. And for me, food choice is probably more important than some of the exercise at times. And you know, that's just my honest opinion on that. But I do think we need to do more, and it's a focus of ours. But yeah. Good. So I kind of, probably is as much as I can say on that currently.
Well, I'm just going to a supplementary, if I may, Chair, which I will delight the Greens. It always seems a bit daft that people drive to a sports centre, do all the exercise, get in the car and drive back home again. Why don't you say to them, if they ran and stopped and then they ran back again, you'd give them a reduction? In other words, by not using the car, it's cheaper, and they're doing themselves good, and they're getting more exercise. How about that? I'm sure the Greens would support that.
It might be challenging. I think we'll... I'd be lying if I said we'd definitely be able to do that, but we'll certainly continue to push active travel. We've had the barrel bikes within our facilities, which is good, and there's lots of bike bays as well.
They're a menace on the pavement, just be careful.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll move on to Councillor Lawrenson, who certainly hasn't eaten all the pies. Maybe you need a couple of more pies, sir.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Two questions. One about something you touched on at the very end about this quality framework. It's a really boring question, but I feel I need to ask it. So there's this organisation called Quest that kind of audit leisure companies. The question is, for the next time you make an appearance at communities, please could we have more detail on what that framework involves, and also perhaps a comparison with other leisure providers? Because I should have prefaced the question with thank you very much. That was a glowing report, and you know, you're doing amazing work. Nonetheless, it'd be good to put it into context in terms of the leisure industry in the UK, because as you said, Quest is like the #1 auditor. So could we have more detail next time? And could we have more context in terms of how Freedom are performing in comparison with other leisure providers?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of Quest, what I do know is those that take part, it's roughly around about 10% that take part achieve a score of excellent. We do get an in-depth report, which is shared with Alan and the council as the client officer. And then we have sort of regular communication on the improvements we're making with the feedback that we've had. So it is shared with the council, but I'll happily let Alan distribute more information, there's actually an online portal as well for local authorities where they can see how their facilities are comparing to other operators across different areas. So you get a good broad understanding there. So that we can certainly do that.
Yeah, I said I'd ask two, and I've already asked two, but this is the actual second question. It does cross over into agenda item 6, but you did mention the over 75s swimming cost going up, and you said it gone up from £20. You said it had gone up £6, but in the related report in the next agenda item, it's actually gone up to £52. So it's not gone up £26, it's gone up to 52, which is way beyond the average price increase of 5.9%. So
can I jump in there, Councillor Amos? Yeah, this is Councillor Lawrenson. So there has been a change to that report. To the report that you've got, there's been a change. So obviously
I'm talking about an old figure.
The pre-meeting, that discussions that we had. But I'll move on to it and explain the reasoning behind that. Yeah.
Good news. Okay, yeah, but if you could come in, that'd be brilliant. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks. It's really, really good that we've still got all our leisure centres open. That's, I think, you know, considering the spate of closures across the country and the relationship that we've got with you and the number of swimming pool closures, it's obviously alarming in terms across the city. So obviously being part of the original swimming pool building case back in 2015-16, and you know how proud we are now that we have a premier leisure facility with a swimming pool, and for those swimming lessons being increased and the number of people that is serving shows strong testament to this council's decision at that point of time in terms of doing that. Perth as well is obviously the premier leisure centre. St John's has had its investment and will be being refurbished as well. The poor partner, as my colleague has highlighted, is Nanu Wood. In terms of that heavily needs investment and some sort of strategy to bring that up to that, because that does serve a specific a large community on its doorstep, and it seems crazy that they be going to St John's in order to, you know, fulfil their basic needs of a class. I mean, that doesn't help our active travel strategy, nor does it benefit, you know, the congestion on our streets in terms of that. So we really do need to have a kind of look at that. I know there should be a bit more of a strategic plan regarding Nunnywood coming up, so that's something for you to kind of take back in terms of that. But overall, you know, some of the activities, extracurricular activities that you are doing, you are fulfilling the need and the job of some of our other agencies that should be stepping up to doing that, and that's recognised as well, and that's been improved over the last couple of years. I think we've got an excellent relationship with you. It's not without its challenges that we've had, and I think we're open and frank enough with the relationship that we've got with you to kind of address some of those challenges, and you've been pretty responsive in terms of that. So yeah, that's what I've got to kind of say in terms of that. It's an open two-way channel. You're pretty responsive in terms of that. Our leisure centres are still open, and we're getting a management fee from you, and that's a really, really good result from our residents' perspective, I think, in terms of that. So are we all happy to note that report? Agreed. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. There will be a quick change of order for the last item. We're going to move it from the Community Safety Partnership ahead of the annual homelessness one when it comes to it. So agenda item 6, Alan.
Thank you, Chair. So the fees and charges proposal for 2026 to come into effect from the 1st of January. Picking up the content of the report from section 3, looking at the pricing rationale for 2026. Freedom Leisure's people costs are their biggest expenditure item, representing about 45% of their cost base. And Freedom have implemented a pay award to ensure that they can retain and attract employees to continue to deliver the business, because across the sector nationally, staff retention has been a challenge. The second area of significant cost to Freedom is as Rob touched on earlier, the energy costs, which represent 11.5% of the cost base. So those two areas, you know, really have put a strain on the business from that perspective. So from the point of view of the fees and charges, inflation stood at 3.8% CPI in September. Freedom's proposal is for an increase of slightly more than that, which is at 4.7%. Within the report, I've included a table which just basically allows you to compare the kind of average increases in this year's proposal compared to the current year of 2025. And there are a couple that I should really kind of pick out in terms of double-digit increases. The first one under swimming activities goes back to the earlier conversation about the over 75s swimming sessions. The over 75s free swimming was an original bid commitment from Freedom Leisure right back in 2015-16 when the contract started. And about halfway through the contract, Freedom included an annual charge of £20 per year, and that has been in operation now for probably about the last 5 years, and hasn't increased during that period. So basically, for a fee of £20 per year, anybody over the age of 75 can come along and swim as often as they want in public swimming sessions. So the proposal, as we go now into the new contract period, it seems an appropriate time for that obviously to have been reviewed after the original 10 years. And the proposal is to increase that from £20 a year to £26 a year. And as Rob alluded to earlier on, we've got just over 100 people that currently that take up that option. The second one is the 10% increase on the artificial grass pitch at Purdyswell. You'll note that there's no increase proposed on the artificial grass pitches at the 2 joint use sites. But the proposal for Purdyswell is in order to bring that facility, which is the newest of the artificial grass pitches in the city, is to bring it back into line with other comparable sites such as Claines Lane and the university pitches, who at the moment are charging more. So, as I say, that's just to kind of make sure that we are kind of being competitive on that basis. In terms of local benchmarking, I've included a table at 3.6 which just highlights the kind of prices that are charged in the kind of Worcestershire area at some of the other premier facilities, just so that you've got a feel for both the kind of adult and junior prices. And you'll see that again, Purdyswell does sit quite well in comparison, particularly on the junior fees in that respect. In terms of the swimming club, the increase in the rates of the swimming club are always discussed with the secretary of the club in advance of this meeting by Rob and the chair, and those fees are always agreed in advance of tonight, so that we know that the swimming club are happy with those increases. And I should just point out as well that when the swimming club are in and using their booking in the main pool, that the learner pool does remain available for kind of community use. One of the promotional activity that Freedom offer is a reduced membership for students at the heart of Worcestershire College. So the membership costs £120 per year. And that allows the students access to, you know, facilities like the gym, swimming, etc. But in partnership with Freedom, the Heart of Worcestershire College actually subsidise half of that membership cost as well. So the actual cost to the student is only £60 a year, which is, I think, excellent value for the access to the facilities that they get. In terms of fitness classes, the proposal is to increase the cost by 4.7% across the venues, and the main driver for that is the fact that within the Worcester contract we continue to offer the Les Mills fitness class programme, which is a licence programme known nationally, and it's an area where some operators around the UK are now starting to withdraw that as a service, but in Worcester, on the Worcester contract, they're very popular classes. So classes like body pump, body step, body attack, body balance, body combat, you'll notice there's a theme here, but they are really popular, have been for a number of years. So, you know, both from the council's point of view and from Freedom Leisure's point of view, we're kind of keen to make sure that we retain the licences for those classes to enable us to continue to offer them. From a tennis point of view, we're looking at an increase of 4% in terms of pay and play tennis, and an increase of 3.4% on the annual pass, which again does offer good value for money, because in terms of membership, it offers members up to 4 hours of tennis per week over a 12-month period, and that works out at less than 40 pence per game for anybody that's utilising all of those times that are available. And in addition, Freedom continue to offer the 15 hours of free tennis, and in conjunction with the 52 hours of free tennis that we support from the council's perspective, in the post-Wimbledon period, which is normally the 3-week period kind of post the tournament finishing. And that's been very, very popular in the last couple of years. We've tried various things over the last few summers, and that one is without doubt the most popular in terms of occupancy. So just looking at the kind of options that were considered. So the preferred option is that we increase the fees and charges, as I alluded to before, at 4.7%. And there are a range of different increases across the activities. And by doing that, it allows Freedom Leisure as our operator to react to the market in terms of demand, etc. Whereas one of the other options that are considered is the kind of standard percentage increase across the board, which again is inflexible then in terms of Freedom being able to adapt to the market and the changes that are taking place within the market. So the data that Rob has access to will drive the decision-making process in terms of identifying particular activities that he thinks are able to be increased, and other activities which may be struggling, and we need to look at kind of supporting and subsidising on a wider basis, which is why, again, just applying a standard percentage increase across the board takes away that flexibility. And then the final option really is just around not applying any price increase at all from the base of the 2025 prices. But of course, that would mean a real challenge for Freedom in terms of meeting their contractual obligations and their ability to meet the kind of management fee in full that they've committed to the council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alan. I'll open it up to the floor. Councillor Lawrenson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alan. Really clear, as always. Yeah, just again, to come back to what I originally asked about the over 75s, can the report be amended to reflect the actual price increase, just as a matter of record? So that's so page 29, 3.5, that could be amended, that'd be great.
Yes,
Thank you.
sorry, Councillor Lawrenson, it has been amended, so I'll make sure that you've got a copy of that report. Yeah, it was picked up in conversation with the chair prior to the meeting. So.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Lawrenson. It's something I picked up in the Cabinet Agenda Planning meeting as well. So, in terms of that, Councillor Kinnersley.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, under item 310, mention the reduced fees for Heart of Worcestershire College students, which is great. Can I just ask why that's not extended to other colleges in this city? I don't know whether it's you've approached them and they haven't agreed, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason for that is that there's a long-term relationship on the site with the Heart of Worcestershire College. The Heart of Worcestershire College actually invested into what we call phase 2 of the building when the refurbishment took place back in 2017, and that was to provide teaching spaces for the college. So what was happening before is they would come to the site to carry out their practical assessments, and then they would have to go back to the college to do a lot of the theory work. So what they've got now is they've got 2 teaching rooms and a couple of studio spaces, which means that the students can come to the site and spend all day on site delivering both the practical and theoretical aspects of their curriculum. And therefore, on that basis, Freedom Leisure as the operator have got almost like a joint use type of agreement, as we've got at Nunnery and St John's with the educational partners. It's not as formal as that, but it's a relationship that's worked really, really well. And therefore, they're in on a daily basis on the site, and that's the reason for that.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions on this item? No. Rob, I've got one question in terms of, maybe between you and Alan, you can kind of answer it. Obviously, in terms of football facilities, and especially the new surface facility that we've got at Purdyswell, I'm really keen to understand in terms of demand, because obviously I've been approached personally from lots and lots of clubs in the city requesting additional facilities or not enough spaces being available in terms of that. So I'm keen to understand and that the price increases that we're facing, especially for football, a national sport of ours, and with thousands of new kids joining the clubs every year, and especially with the drive in women's football and girls football and the success of the Lionesses, are we capitalising on? Are we? I suppose what I'm trying to say is is it actual market pressures that we're responding to in terms of the price changes, in terms of demand, or is it actual costs that are going up related to those facilities, hence why we have to charge more? Because I'm just conscious that, the demographic that football's at a grassroots level, that our entrance, we don't want it to be cost prohibitive. It's a sport that should be accessible to everybody for as cheap as possible, and if it's purely demand led, then we need more facilities in order to counteract that.
If I can just come in there, Jebba, and just answer that one initially, and Rob may want to kind of comment beyond that. I think from the knowledge we have locally, there is no doubt, talking to local clubs, that they've all got their own development plans, and the demand on facilities is growing all the time. The most recent playing pitch strategy was completed back in 2023. That initially identified a shortfall of 3 pitches, which have now been delivered at the university and at Purd as well, and Claines Lane. So, but of course, the market has moved in that time, so there is further demand now because of the fact that teams are really making big strides in increasing the number of teams that they're looking to provide. So, just to answer your question about the kind of pricing element, the Football Foundation grant requirements at Purd as well means that at the moment, the way it's been profiled, there is a small surplus generated in terms of income versus expenditure, but any element of surplus that is generated has to be reinvested back into the facility itself. So, for instance, that might be replacement equipment, it might be financing some hours for a coach to go back in and do certain sessions, but whatever, if there is any surplus generated, that cannot be used by Freedom for any other part of the business, it has to go back into the football facility.
No, thank you. And how is the surface standing up to the demand and use?
Well, I sent it through to Alan earlier. I think over the 12-month sort of forecast, I think we're where we need to be in terms of being in line with the grant agreement that we had with the Football Foundation. So, yeah, in terms of the occupancy, it's very busy every evening and at weekends. There's certainly opportunity to grow the programme, or try to in the daytime, but certainly every single evening it is full. And following sort of speaking to the teams, I know they would welcome, even more opportunity to take part.
Fantastic, thank you. So are we all happy that we note the contents of the report and recommend the fees and charges in Appendix 1 and approve it so it goes to Policy and Resources Committee on the 25th of November? All those happy? That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Rob. Okay, we have agenda item 7, which is the quarter 1 and 2 performance report. Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, conscious we've got 2 substantive items coming up, so I'll whiz through this and try and get to questions quickly. Because we've changed our committee cycle process and we've removed the July committee, we didn't get the quarter 1 performance report to members in time for June. So this evening's report has got 2 appendices. It's got the quarter 1 performance report that you would have normally have had in July, and the Q2 report which you would get for this committee cycle. So I'm going to focus on the Q2 performance report, which is appendix 2. So usual format. Just in terms of the projects, the majority are green, so are in progress and on track. And the one that is amber is delivery of the homelessness and rough sleeper strategy and action plan. And Rosie will cover some commentary off on that as part of her report a little later. In terms of the performance indicators, there are some red, and they relate to the community engagement functions. Members will be aware that as part of our financial sustainability plan, we lost some community engagement resource earlier in the year, and we're just about to recruit or go out to recruitment for some replacement posts that remained as part of the structure, so we can start to build that work back up again. There's some narrative around the number of properties we've improved through the private sector housing team. That's dropped during Q2, but there's some narrative there that explains that away, as there is for the performance indicators relating to homelessness as well. And if there's any questions, I'm sure Tom and Rosie can take those. So I will stop there, Chair, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I'll open it up to the floor. Councillor Collier.
Thanks so much for that. It's not a question, it's just a comment which you did sort of allude to, but I just wanted to say out loud that we are really seeing here that as a result of our financial sustainability plan, so many people in our city have lost events and opportunities from our community engagement team, which really have been the heart and soul of what it meant to live where they live. So I look forward to us moving forward positively, hopefully, because that's been a real shame.
Thank you, Councillor Collier. Councillor Sarah.
I just wanted to make a particular point about the section looking at the youth engagement team and the work that they do. I know that I've used them in my ward on several occasions to speak with groups of young people, try to address problems and issues that the community was experiencing, and they just do an amazing job. We could not function without them. I think the funding currently is running out at the end of the year, which, well, we need to be aware of that and make sure that we plug that gap, because we can't do without them.
Thank you, Councillor Sarah.
Yeah, just to respond to Councillor Collier's point, and it's very much noted. So obviously, some of the funding that related to our community engagement function was county council funding, connected back to asset-based community development. So you know, some of those decisions were outside of our control, unfortunately. As we progress through the remainder of this year and into January, we will bring a new community engagement strategy to members for approval. Initially to go to consultation on, and I'm hoping that will reassure you that as a council we will continue to do community engagement. It might look differently, but we'll certainly continue to do it, and it just won't be a function of a community engagement team. It'll be a function of the whole council.
Councillor Sarah, I do apologise. Was there a question in your? There's a comment about that. Yeah, I mean, and I'll.
The question about making sure that we can find funding for them beyond the end of the year.
Yeah, so you're right that the funding that we received from county is due to come to an end at the end of December. We've been in conversation with County Council, the public health team, around the opportunity to secure some additional funding. So I don't have an update to share today, but that's a sort of live conversation that we're currently exploring.
I hope that provides some reassurance. Obviously, we've been battling for that, or batting, whichever way you want to kind of put in terms of, so hopefully some good news. Councillor Collier, absolutely agree with you. All we've kind of built up over the last 4 or 5 years, and the position that we're in terms of the amount of engagement that we've done and great community spirit, and as a result of it, making Worcester a beautiful and better place in terms of obviously the Worcester Show and all the other events and all the local community events has been a result of that. And it kind of seems a backward step from county not to recognise all that hard work that we've kind of what we've put in to build us up to that level for only for us to fall back down. So obviously we'll be championing it at county as well as the city level. It's got to continue it. Absolutely, that's what is. It's recreated the fabric of the city in terms of that and that community spirit, which is now slowly, because of national events, being torn apart. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I note the report suggests a strong rate of successful homelessness prevention, and that's really welcome. But having supported a family over the summer, I'd just like to ask that when the council does discharge its duty by making a final offer of accommodation, what safeguards are in place to ensure that the outcome is genuinely sustainable, especially when you consider individuals who've got complex health conditions, disabilities, or trauma?
Rosie, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so as you know, obviously we have huge demand on our services and a shortage of affordable housing. But what I can certainly reassure you on is that our housing officers work really closely with, whether they're families or single households or couples, to whom we owe a homeless duty. And legislation is very clear about what is considered to be a suitable offer to be able to discharge that duty effectively. And that's not just about the size of a property or the affordability or the fabric of it. It's about the risk that's posed to them in a particular type of property or in a particular area, obviously health needs, support needs. And so all of those things are taken into account when making that offer. And then the legislation also has a number of safeguards in place where people can review the suitability of an offer if they don't believe that it's suitable for them. They can do that internally to us initially and can also take that through the court process beyond that as well. So there's quite a number of protections in place to ensure that it's a suitable offer.
Thank you. And does the performance framework distinguish between placements that are accepted willingly versus those that are accepted under protest?
For the actual outcome data, do you mean? So we certainly don't record people who accept an offer, but they aren't the biggest fans of it, shall we say. No, that's not something we record. But it's what we're really clear about is that we have conversations with people right from the very first time that we meet with them about what the reality of what an offer may look like, and that, you know, the element of choice and the element of being able to have all of the criteria that they might desire may not be possible given they're in a crisis situation. So no, that's not something we record separately, but we certainly work really closely with people so that they understand when an offer is made that actually that represents the best opportunity for them.
And just one final question. Are outcomes monitored after the duty is discharged? And I'm particularly thinking about ensuring that placements don't break down and lead to actual homelessness.
So I think probably what we look at there is not setting people up to fail. So we don't monitor in the sense that we continue to work with them once they've moved in, simply because we don't have the capacity to do that. But if they're moving into social housing, then the social landlords in the city have tenancy sustainability teams that can provide support. We do have our own outreach support team, so if we feel that someone's going to need some additional support to sustain accommodation, we can put that in, and we will always provide sign-up support where that's needed. So if somebody hasn't had a tenancy before, we can help them set up benefits, set up utilities, set up direct debits to make sure that we're giving them the best possible chance to sustain. And then we also have arrangements in place with social landlords that if they do have concerns about the sustainability of a tenancy, they can refer at a very early stage into us. And again, that outreach support service can go and try to overcome whatever issues there are.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rosie, for that answer. Councillor Amos.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a question on HMOs and homelessness. Shall I ask them now or some other or later? Now? Okay, yeah. The first one on HMOs. I'm pleased, but I'm a bit surprised where it says the property standards complaints level has gone down. It doesn't really seem to know why, but it did mention milder weather. I'm not quite sure why milder weather would mean you don't complain about a housing standard. I mean, what I often hear, and I think a lot of colleagues would hear the same as I do, that people are afraid to make complaints. They're afraid to make complaints. And I find that very worrying. So I just wondered whether officers have picked that up, or whether they could throw a little bit more light on why complaints have gone down. Unless, of course, I've misread the situation, and what people tell me is not typical of the general picture. But I'm still not quite sure why milder weather should lead to a reduction in complaints. Tom?
Yeah, so a significant proportion of property standards complaints that we receive will be around damp and mould generally. So that is dictated largely by weather. So if it's wet, we do tend to get more complaints around damp and mould, which drives the number of reports that we get through. We don't know whether sort of concerns about reporting and repercussions from landlords is driving a lower number of complaints or referrals coming through. But what we are trying to do is to encourage and create opportunities for people to report into us. So we do regular press releases. We have surgeries at the Trinity Street Advice Centre with the private sector housing team for people coming in. We attended the recent resident drop-in session here at the Guildhall. So we're trying to encourage and support people to make complaints and report concerns, but exactly what's driving that is somewhat unclear. But we know that other district councils we've spoken to have seen a similar decline in referrals, so it's not just Worcester.
Perhaps I shouldn't be so simple. My second question, Chair, if I may, is about homelessness, but I don't know whether it applies to this report or the next report, but it doesn't really matter. The question is straightforward. It's really about veterans and homelessness and what we're doing in particular, because they have been identified as a group with particular needs. We are a signatory to the Armed Forces Covenant as well. So I just wonder what we're doing that's special and in addition to what we would normally do for this group of people, because I understand quite a few rough sleepers could well be veterans. And I know Councillor Agar, for example, works closely in this field as well. I would be interested to know what we're doing in particular to help this group, because I think it is a special group. You know, people who are prepared to give up their lives and die for this country. I think, you know, if they fall on hard times or whatever, we should look after them very well, especially.
Tom?
Yeah, so we are obviously signed up to the Armed Forces Covenant, and there are certain criteria that sit within that align to housing and how we respond to housing for veterans. So we take that into account when a veteran applies for housing. There's a specific question to enable us to identify that that person is a veteran, and that then triggers officers to consider their circumstances, see what additional support or needs they have. Within our allocations policy, it specifically references the various different criteria that apply specifically to veterans and their families. So there are additional concessions made and considerations when we receive applications from veterans, which I can point you in the direction of our allocations policy if that helps sort of provide the detail.
Yeah, I mean, do we have any statistics on this? Because obviously, I think we would all be committed to this, but in terms of numbers, how many are we identifying? How many are we helping as a percentage, that kind of thing? That's what I'd be interested to know, because unless they're getting the extra special help, I'm not sure what we're contributing to the covenant that we've signed up to.
Chair, we need to come back to Councillor Amos on any numbers, but what I can confirm is that our housing allocations policy certainly references the Armed Forces Covenant, and what the Armed Forces Covenant and the National Guidance requests councils to do, that is built into our housing allocations policy. So when a veteran presents to us, not only do we identify that early, but all the additional preferences and the concessions, as Tom says, that's available to them. As long as we've got the information from them, we can apply that so they get priority.
Right. If the officer can just send me some information and statistics, that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to pick up on the point, the first point you made, Councillor Amos, in terms of whether people are being afraid or not. In terms of that, and we do get a number of, as all of us do, get a number of complaints from dodgy landlords, rogue landlords in terms of that, and we ran a particular campaign over the last couple of years through this committee in terms of identifying those and giving our enforcement officers the greater powers in order to be able to go out and enforce those. But the sad reality is, a lot of these people that come and complain to us don't then follow up with an official formal complaint. So I'm keen to understand why that is as well. What's stopping them then taking it to that next level, which will give our officers the statutory powers they have then to go and investigate, and then if found if a breach of any of the conditions is found, in terms of property condition, we can go out and enforce. So I'm really keen to that. So the message out to the public is, if you're in fear, we have got the statutory powers to go and enforce. So I want to understand from the general public why that last stage, they're really keen to obviously complain to us as local councillors. We follow it up with the officers. Officers then start proceedings, but then the people that complain don't want to take it to a formal stage. So that's where the blockage is. Hopefully, with what our government is doing now in terms of the Renters' Right Reform Act, gives greater powers and greater protection to people in this situation. So hopefully, that lull that we've experienced should see seeing an increase, because I've already had people complain about forced evictions or dodgy rogue landlords approaching me for eviction within this period. So the landlords aren't getting the message of what this means. The more of our tenants that get empowered and understand what powers and rights that they have, that trickle will start increasing, and that will give us that. So, but really keen to understand why people are afraid not to get to that final stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
That's all right. Councillor Kinsley.
Thank you. My question was actually covered by that previous discussion, but can I just make one comment, if I may? Actually, just a general matter. I'm conscious that we're focusing on the Q2 reporting here, so we're sort of skipping over the Q1 stuff. Bearing in mind that there's been a change to the committee cycles, is that going to be reflected in the reports that we asked? I'm just thinking of officers sort of gone to some work to produce Q1 stuff, which is not now being scrutinised in the way that it would have been before. So, is there a bit of work there just to try and streamline the reporting to make sure we're making best use of officers' time? Thank you.
So Chair, we will share the Q1 reports with members probably via the Wednesday members briefing, so members will get to see it, and obviously if members have any concerns with performance, they can contact us outside of the committee process. And I recall that even though we didn't have a round of policy committees in July, all performance reports relating to committees went to P&R committee in July. So there was a committee that had oversight of them. It just wasn't the relevant policy committees.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments on this report? Can we take it all as noted then, please? Thank you. And we'll move on to the annual homelessness and rough sleepers report.
So I think, as I've said in the report, in previous years, the annual homeless report has included quite detailed level of statistics and data and information about the service delivery and outcomes. But because we're currently in the process of a really comprehensive homelessness review in preparation for our new homelessness strategy, this year's report is really more just as an overview of activity and the homelessness review will be presented to members once that's complete, and that will really drill down into a huge level of detail. So I've included, so it's just to highlight as well that this annual report is obviously for the year 24-25. So looking back a bit, and actually a number of things, a number of funding streams, a number of ways in which we're operating have changed since then. So I've just set out the legislative context within which we operate. I'm not going to go over that in huge amounts of detail, but really just to highlight the fact that homelessness is a really regulated and legislative driven area of the service. There's a number of specific housing and homelessness legislation that we have to comply with, but also working with other statutory services and other agencies also need to have knowledge and be applying the council's duties under other acts, non-housing specific acts as well. So there's quite a lot of legislation that we do need to apply when making those homeless decisions. In terms of the policy context, so obviously our city plan covers a whole range of areas, many of which could be considered to be relevant for housing and homelessness, because I think, as we all know, housing is a fundamental element of everybody's well-being. Having a stable home will inevitably have a positive impact in all areas of your life. So it is relevant to most of the areas of the city plan, but the two where it's most specifically mentioned in terms of homelessness is strong and engaged communities, where we're talking about reducing the number of families in temporary accommodation and reducing the number of individuals sleeping rough, and having a healthy and active city, again, focusing on rough sleeping, homeless households, those who've spent time in temporary accommodation or in any type of homeless accommodation, have much poorer health outcomes than the general population, and none more so than those who have experienced rough sleeping as well. So that's a really key area that we're looking at in terms of health inequalities and outcomes for those individuals. So just looking at other areas that kind of interact, so we don't work in isolation, we do a huge amount of collaborative and partnership working, both internally with other services and other statutory and voluntary sector agencies. As I've said, housing is a fundamental, but it interacts with so many other areas, and very, very rarely is housing the only issue that somebody faces, and it isn't the only solution either. So section 3 just looks at funding, and again, just to emphasise that this was the funding picture for 24-25. It is slightly different for 25-26, and as I'm sure you know, we are awaiting the 3-year funding settlement for local government probably around Christmas time, which will mean that we will be able to more longer term plan how we deliver the service and what services we deliver once we have that information. But for 24-25, I've included the level of funding we received from the government via the Homelessness Prevention Grant, and the purpose of that is to embed the Homelessness Reduction Act to reduce the number of families in temporary accommodation, and in particular reduce the use of bed and breakfast accommodation, and in particular for families. And then I've listed the areas of work that HPG grant has contributed to, some of which have been posts hosted by ourselves, some have been external posts or contributions to other services delivered externally. In addition to the Homelessness Prevention Grant funding, we've had specific rough sleeper funding, and again, having a 3-year allocation for 2026 onwards will be really, really beneficial, because so much of the rough sleeper funding we've had over the last few years has been very short term or very specific, or with very short timescales on when we have to deliver it, which then obviously curtails some of that longer term planning and joining things up. But we've maximised best use of the funding that we've had, again, to ensure that there is adequate support for individuals who are rough sleeping or at risk of rough sleeping, and that's around providing both accommodation options through our No Second Night Out model, as well as support to sustain people into accommodation and to prevent homelessness from accommodation. We've also worked really closely with St Paul's this year, really positive relationship with them in making best use of that as a really fantastic resource for the city, to have a hostel that has 24/7 support and specialist support from staff. So we've used some one-off funding that we were allocated for Rough Sleepers to fund a post there for 2 years, which will then enable people who are living in the hostel to work towards moving on into independent living, which is a great outcome for them, but it also means that we then have access to the spaces that are freed up by that, so that we can reduce rough sleeping in that sense. So as I said, I have included some stats in here around service demand, so similar levels of demand on the service to previous years, around 2,000 approaches per year. They don't all result in a full homelessness application being taken. It may be that we are able to give advice and assistance at that early stage. These figures are very much driven by the data that we have to report to government quarterly. So when we're talking about assessments, that is a full housing assessment that is within legislation. But for a lot of those people who are included in those figures, we have still done quite a lot of work with them. It's just not eligible to be classed as a full housing assessment. And then obviously, we try to be very much evidence-led in the service, so looking at the reasons why people are approaching us in order that we can put strategies in place to address those reasons and try to prevent that rather than dealing with crisis. And actually our reasons for approach have been relatively stable, within a few percentages for a number of years, and that is predominantly around the ending of private rented sector tenancies, around family and friend exclusions, domestic abuse, and then leaving either institutions, whether that's hospital, prison, and then supported accommodation as well. It also reflects the increasing complexity of the individuals that we're seeing, who may not be able to access the services that they need, or not be able to access them in the way that they need, which means that we're seeing more people perhaps who aren't able to sustain accommodation without that additional support. So in response to those reasons for approach, we have put measures in place. So we have a specialist domestic abuse officer. So if people approach us and we believe that they may have experienced domestic abuse, then we have an officer who is specially trained, trauma-informed, and has specialist skills around domestic abuse, who can provide support alongside their housing application, because for anybody it can be a difficult experience, in particular for those who've experienced domestic abuse. We've done a lot of work over the last couple of years around individuals leaving prison with no fixed abode. That is a significant issue nationally. It isn't a huge issue for Worcester or West Mercia, but it is an issue sufficient for us to need to have protocols and procedures in place. So we meet regularly with prison probation staff to identify individuals who are currently in custody, who are likely to be NFA on release. We also are able to have video calls now in prison, so that rather than somebody on the day of release has to just turn up at our offices, we can talk to them well before that they're released and put a plan in place where possible, or at least provide them with advice about where they can access support. We also do a lot of work with the NHS around hospital discharge. I'm sure, as you all know, there's huge issues around individuals who may go into hospital with a home, but because of the reason they've gone into hospital, that home is no longer suitable for them on discharge, or they've gone in homeless, and obviously they're still homeless on discharge. So we meet weekly with our patient liaison officer and with adult social care to look at those planned discharges for individuals who are either homeless or at risk of homelessness, to ensure that there are safe discharges in place and so that the NHS has availability of beds as it's needed. In terms of family exclusions, that's a significant issue that we've had and has been identified as a need. So the outreach service that I mentioned earlier, we've ensured that all of those officers are trained in mediation so that we're able to offer home visits for individuals who are excluded by family and friends to try to mediate that relationship to prevent the breakdown of that accommodation, or at least delay it so that we can have a planned move rather than a crisis move, which is always a better outcome for everybody. So looking in terms of successful preventions, so this is, again, 24-25, and you'll have seen Q1 and 2 of this year in the performance report. And you can see that our rates do fluctuate quite a bit, and when I've looked at what lies behind that, and a significant influence on that is simply the number of social housing properties that have been available during that period of time. So if there's fewer properties advertised, fewer to bid on, then prevention and relief successful outcomes reduce, unfortunately, which makes sense. And again, we've identified that the vast majority where we are able to prevent successfully is preventing by moving somebody from one accommodation to another. What we're trying to do with the home visit and mediation procedure is to enable them to remain where they are, because even though they haven't experienced the disruption of temporary accommodation, moving and everything that goes with that is obviously also disruptive. So talking about temporary accommodation, that has been a real success story for us over the last couple of years. So we've significantly reduced the number of individuals that we have in temporary accommodation over the last couple of years. So from 77 at the end of 22-23 to 41 at the end of 24-25. And we've also significantly reduced the use of bed and breakfast accommodation and the length of stay of all individuals, but particularly families in bed and breakfast accommodation. And we've been at 0 for the last couple of years there. So we really prioritise moving families out of bed and breakfast into self-contained accommodation as soon as possible. And we're really careful about how we do our temporary accommodation placements and making sure that it's safe and appropriate for everybody that we're placing. We've also acquired a number of additional self-contained temporary accommodation units last year, and we're looking at acquiring some additional units this year also, which will help us firstly to provide better quality, more suitable accommodation, but also to reduce expenditure on temporary accommodation as well, because we then are managing it and have more control over that expenditure. So in terms of rough sleeping then, as I've said, it's a very small proportion of homelessness in Worcester. You look at 2,000 approaches and 800 applications. Actually, rough sleeping, is a very, very small proportion of that, but it is the most visible form and arguably has the biggest impact on those individuals. As I've said, health inequalities, multiple disadvantage. Housing is not the only issue and certainly not the only solution, but is a key solution for those individuals. We do an annual count each year, which we're required to report to government. The most recent count that's been published was October last year, which counted 24 individuals who were rough sleeping on a single night in Worcester City. And we've also identified that a number of those individuals are from other areas, so other districts of Worcestershire, as well as out of area. And so that's something that we're keen to work with our neighbouring authorities on in terms of reconnection and accessing support in their districts. In terms of providing support for rough sleeping, as I've said in the funding section, we fund a number of support services and some accommodation services, but certainly accommodation is, it's key to success, whether that is temporary accommodation that we're providing or whether it's St Paul's or other supported accommodation or their own tenancy. And that is where the gap lies for us currently in terms of specialist accommodation for those individuals who just simply aren't able to sustain independent accommodation and need that specialist support. So we have used a lot of resources over the last year or so to provide discretionary temporary accommodation placement. So to individuals who we wouldn't normally owe a temporary accommodation duty to under homeless legislation, we've accommodated a number of those individuals in order to safeguard them and in order to try to move them on into sustainable accommodation and give them a stable base from which to access other support that they need. And so I've said in here that we've actually had an 81% success rate, which actually, if you'd asked me before we started doing it, I would have been shocked at that success rate. You know, it has been really, really positive, but you know, being clear that that has taken a huge amount of work. So a lot of the services that we fund, whether that's MAGS, CCP, St Paul's and so on, as a, you know, it's required a really collaborative approach to have wraparound support for those individuals in that accommodation, because it isn't inherently suitable for them, because it doesn't come with support on site, which has then meant a reduction in outreach, and that's what we're hoping to address when we get the new funding allocation, but a good news story nonetheless. I think I've mentioned here at committee before around our Making Every Adult Matter approach, our MEME approach. So that is about identifying individuals who are multiply disadvantaged, who have a significant impact on public services, whether that's us, criminal justice, health services and so on, and recognising and acknowledging that they aren't able to access services in the way that services want them to and are set up for them to access it. And so trying to flex ours and other statutory agency services around them to meet their needs where they are. We're starting with a small cohort in order to try to demonstrate the success of that, in order that we can try to roll that out more widely. But again, we're at quite an early stage there. So Appendix 1 of the report includes a very long, apologies, update on the homelessness strategy action plans. Obviously, that is a 3 or 4 year update now. So there's a huge amount in there. There's a huge amount that has been achieved. And as part of the homelessness review, what we're looking at is, I think, you know, every single one of those actions has got complete or successful against it. But what we want to do is evaluate the impact of those. So it may be that, yes, we did deliver what we said we would, but has that achieved what we wanted it to achieve? So that will be a key part of the homelessness review. And again, that will be brought back to members. And one of the asks for this evening is that you approve the extension of our current homelessness and rough sleeping strategy in order to give us the time to develop the new Worcester City strategy for this year. So whereas previous years we've always done a county-wide strategy, because we really want to focus on Worcester's needs and Worcester's demands and Worcester solutions. We're doing our own strategy this year. We're statutorily, it's not an issue because we're well within the 5-year period. So we're just asking for approval for that to be extended. And in terms of future risks and opportunities, I've set out what we're looking at. We all know about local government reorganisation. That poses many risks and many opportunities that we can grasp and make the best use of. In terms of funding, the 3-year settlement will be really welcome, but there is potential that some of it may be unring-fenced, and what we want to do is protect all of that funding to continue to be able to deliver homelessness and rough sleeping services. And I think I'm done. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rosie, for that really comprehensive report. I'll open it up to the floor. Councillor Murray, Councillor Lamb, Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. Rosie, that's absolutely commendable. What wonderful work you're doing, and thank you. And thank you for everything you've brought to this meeting. I just wanted to briefly ask whether Worcester could look at adopting the SAFE protocol, which has been developed by the Shared Health Foundation, and to strengthen how we assess suitability for temporary accommodation for families. I don't wish to increase your workload, but it focuses on safety, accessibility, family needs and environment, and it's already being used in councils to protect children in housing crisis. If we embed it now, it puts us in a stronger position as we move to a unitary authority. It's much harder to lose good practice than it is to adopt it. So once it's in place, hopefully that will continue when we move to that unitary authority. So I wondered if officers could review the protocol and come back to committee with a recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of temporary accommodation, the government signalled with recent funding for councils with the highest number of children in temporary accommodation that is going to be a key priority for them. As I've said in the report, we are expecting a cross-cutting government strategy on temporary accommodation, and the indications are that families and particularly children in temporary accommodation is going to be a really key priority there. We are already implementing a number of the areas around the SAFE protocol, and we're starting to talk to schools around ensuring that there's awareness there of the impact on children who are living in temporary accommodation, whether that's just around emotional well-being, whether it's practical issues in terms of being able to do homework or getting to school on time and that kind of thing. So those are things that we are already looking at, absolutely. And I think it is worth highlighting, though, that the kind of national discussion around children in bed and breakfast and children in temporary accommodation in a lot of ways doesn't apply to us in Worcester. We have done a huge amount of work, which means that I can honestly say that I would stay in our temporary accommodation with my family if necessary. I'm proud of the accommodation that we have. It is all safe, it is all licensed, it's inspected regularly, and we do move people on as soon as possible. But absolutely, we will take that away to embed the protocol.
Yes, I've also seen the temporary accommodation, and it's not as horrific as you might expect. But those conversations with schools, and if we could be having those conversations with GPs as well, that would be really helpful for those children, because it's a trauma to go through for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, I think Councillor Lamb.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was good to hear you and see mentioned a lot in the report about St Paul's, because I visited there a couple of weeks ago, and it really is a unique provider in the city. And they were really positive about the funding they'd received for these officers or these workers to help people move on from St Paul's into more permanent accommodation. But I suppose my question stroke comment is about capacity, because I understand, I think the capacity, I think I'm right, is about 44 rooms at St Paul's, but because they run it in cooperation with Platform and Sanctuary Housing, not all those rooms are always available, and I think they had about 6 rooms out of action at St Paul's because of maintenance issues which have to be provided by the Housing Association. And I think St Paul's are also making a bid for some more rooms for an extension in order to raise their capacity up to more than 60 rooms, which obviously would be really, really helpful in helping us deal with housing effectively. So what can we do as a council to help them maintain and increase their capacity, because they do something that nobody else does in the city, to be honest with you.
Chair, if I take that, we have had discussions with the CEO of St Paul's around this issue, and obviously we would support any increase in capacity at the site. And we're aware conversations are taking place with both Platform and Sanctuary, with potential plans being developed, and we stand by, and we're playing a bit of a watching game at the moment to see what role we can play. So at the moment, there's nothing directly we are identifying that we can do, but we are a key partner as part of the conversations.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrenson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some comments and then I'll end with a question. So thank you very much, Rosie. Really detailed report, one of the best I've seen in 13 and a half years of coming to these meetings. Fantastically laid out and detailed. A second point, I'm constantly amazed at what this council achieves in terms of the Homelessness Reduction Act 2017, given that when this piece of legislation came in, councils were not given lots of resources to enable this act to actually come into being in terms of making a difference to people's lives. So the very fact that we can make a difference without that extra funding is commendable. I was really pleased to see mention in the report about more self-contained accommodation because no one really wants to stay in a B&B. The comment was made very well by Councillor Murray about the trauma, the uncertainty. So the fact that we've got sort of 9 more self-contained units, temporary accommodation, that's really good news. Also, the fact that you highlighted that rough sleeping is a very small proportion of homelessness. You know, my own ignorance has been challenged in recent years. I used to think that homelessness was just people on the streets, and it obviously is not. So I like that you emphasised that in the report. Finally, good news about homelessness and rough sleeping funding allocation being expected for a 3-year settlement. To finish, the question, I think you might have answered it, to be honest. Will it be absorbed into the new council's budget, or will that 3-year settlement be devoted to Worcester for the next 3 years, whatever the reorganisation looks like? So are we going to keep the money for Worcester for 3 years, is what I'm really asking.
Again, Chair, I'll probably give quite a bureaucratic answer. The money that we will get as part of the 3-year settlement is Worcester City Council's money. So we will treat it as our own, and I'm sure as we go into LGI in whatever form that takes, the 3rd year of that money, if that falls into the 1st year of the new authority, we will make sure that's ring-fenced for use in Worcester.
Thank you. Thank you for your question as well. Councillor, one more.
Thank you. Thanks again, Rosie. I've said it before in committee. I think your team really is at the sharp end of you know what happens, and there aren't many people, I think, who could cope with the level of work and everything that comes with it that your team do. So we are all eternally grateful. Can I ask a question, please, about the table with the reasons for approach in terms of homelessness assistance? Does the left institution, e.g. prison, hospital, or eviction from supported accommodation include young care leavers? Is that captured within those categories?
No.
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 In which case, in the strategy table, there is a mention of work that is happening with 16 and 17-year-old care leaver protocols, and it says currently under review between the Worcestershire districts and children's services. Have you got any progress on that? Is that a process that is progressing nicely, or has it stalled, or has it hit barriers that we could help overcome?
Yeah, so we currently have a 16, 17-year-old protocol, and we've had that in place for a number of years. It came out of a really tragic case, which meant that children's services and housing departments needed to work far more closely together. And we also have a care leavers protocol, again, with children's services. And what the new protocol is trying to do is bring that together, essentially. So it's around a young people's protocol. It's been drafted. It's going through approval processes, essentially, at the moment. But we do have really good links with children's services in Worcester. So we have a monthly care leavers panel, for example. So we will meet with children's services, with young people who are leaving care, their PA, and plan that, because the absolute worst thing would be for somebody to turn 18 and have to come down to our offices. So we will always try to resolve that prior to that cliff edge, and very, very rarely, if ever, I think in my experience, would that be the case. There would either be stay and put arrangements, or there would be a move on plan in place. So we do work closely with children's services currently.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? No. And Councillor Wilmore, you raised a really, really good point, and I know the late, great Andy Roberts is real passionate of his in terms of like care leavers in there, and then I think it was taken on by Councillor Steve Mackay as well, and mentioned in the in this room specifically in terms of that. And I think Rosie's taken some of that on board, and to make sure that we've kind of drafted it into our kind of policies. A lot of members have said, you know, well, thank you, Rosie, for a really, really good report, and I'd like to thank you as well in terms of what you and your team achieve. You are, as Councillor Wilmore said, at the sharp end of it, and some of the cases that you see, to the level of details that you see is you know, it's harrowing, and the amount of coping mechanism that you have to kind of cope in terms of that, and especially the volume of cases. I don't know how many I put towards you and Tom in terms of that, and to have the resilience to be able to cope with that and provide an excellent service speaks volumes. Councillor Lawrenson mentioned since 2017 the improvements that we've had with reducing budget, and that's a testament to this council and our strategy and how we keep ourselves honest and true for the level of output that we get from your team in terms of that. I was on a call with the Minister yesterday, Ali McGovern, regarding homelessness and future funding for our council. Obviously the situation is tough out there. It's the national government policy is the biggest transfer of wealth from to our communities of deprivation. That is the national that is the national way the funding formula is going to go, and obviously there are some indices of multiple deprivation which the funding formula will be reliant upon, which we've received, and Worcester should be a little bit beneficial of that, but we have to be realistic in terms of that. What I did fight for from Worcester's perspective is obviously what we're doing around homelessness, and that we are a city in best practice, and they want to hear from us. So if we can feed what we're doing back into homelessness, that they're, you know, that, and put that in front of the Minister to show how well we're doing and how we've managed to cope, and especially our successes and our huge successes, because of you know, the successive chairs that have been here in my position for the last few years that have driven that temporary accommodation down, and making sure that we're getting people out of that bed and breakfast or the usage to, you know, the exorbitant rates that we're paying bed and breakfast into long-term sustainable accommodation is directly politically led strategy from people in this chair. So huge congratulations. Please send that work on to the Minister and make that introduction and fight our case, because the government's strategy is going to be, I think, is due for December or something like that, in January, isn't it, in terms of that. So they want to hear from us. So still that consultation open, and I've made the connection. All right. Fantastic. So if we can all approve the recommendations in 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3, we're all happy. Thank you. Members, we've only got one item left. Are we happy to carry on? Is that okay? Good. We've got Community Safety Partnership annual update. Tom?
Thank you, Chair. Difficult act to follow from Rosie, but I'll try my best. Conscious this is another very long report with lots and lots of detail in it, but I'll try and provide just a bit of a summary and then just lead on to questions if that's okay with everybody. This is an annual report that we've brought for the past few years to provide an update around the response and delivery through the Community Safety Partnership. It's a requirement for local authorities as a responsible authority to develop a strategy and to respond to crime and disorder within the local area. So we're part of the South Worcestershire Community Safety Partnership, along with Malvern Hills and Wychavon councils. And the purpose of a CSP, Community Safety Partnership, is to look at opportunities to reduce crime, the fear of crime, antisocial behaviour, drug and alcohol misuse, and to reduce reoffending. So that's the focus of the Community Safety Partnership. One of the requirements of the CSP is to undertake a strategic assessment and community needs assessment. So that's looking at the data that helps inform what response is required, essentially. So that's undertaken every other year. The latest version we have covered the period the 1st of August 21 to the 31st of July last year. So we'll be due our next strategic assessment next year, and it covers a three-year period. So there's an opportunity to see and look at trends over a period of time. So the the strategic assessment provides a review of the activity and also looks forward over the coming 12 months to help inform what the anticipated picture is going to look like. That then is used to inform each community safety partnership's action plan. So essentially what we'll do as a community safety partnership in response to the strategic needs of the area. So we have a new action plan for the community safety partnership, which runs from this year until 2028. And the priorities that are included within that surround the response to domestic burglary, domestic abuse, vulnerability to exploitation, the nighttime economy, hate crime, antisocial behaviour, road safety and integrated offender management. And ownership of that action plan sits across the community safety partnership. So whilst there's individual organisations that form part of that partnership, it's a sort of joint responsibility and ownership of that document. The Community Safety Partnership receives funding from the Police and Crime Commissioner. A proportion of that can then be used to fund other activities, and it's an annual opportunity for organisations and projects to put forward proposals to seek funding, and that's considered annually at the Community Safety Partnership of how that funding will be distributed. I'll come on to what that was allocated for shortly. The governance arrangements around crime and disorder. So we have the local South Worcestershire Community Safety Partnership. That feeds into the Worcestershire Safer Communities Board. And the purpose of that is to sort of align the two community safety partnerships in the north and south of the county and to coordinate any activity that crosses boundaries. So obviously some of the nature of the activity of community safety partnerships doesn't stick within geographical or administrative boundaries. So to ensure things are aligned across the county. In Worcester, we then have the Safer Worcester Partnership, and that's very much a sort of a Worcester response to, and how we're going to deliver elements of the Community Safety Partnership Action Plan in Worcester. So that discusses various topics, particularly relevant to Worcester, things like Purple Flag, the Safe Space Project, our response to youth intervention, White Ribbon Campaign. There's a whole host of things that will be discussed and addressed at the Safer Worcester Partnerships. There's also serious organised crime meetings. Serious organised crime is reviewed at the police tasking meetings. So this is where there's sort of wider organised criminality and where there's emerging issues or trends that have been identified, and to convene a sort of multi-agency response to how that will be addressed, generally led by the police. We also have the Worcester City Multi-Agency Tactical Group meeting, MATG, and that's very much sort of looking at individual cases or individuals, so where there's a presenting or emerging issue relating to a locality or a person or an emerging theme. It's a very operational meeting, a multi-agency meeting to look at how we can respond collectively to those, to that issue or that individual. So section 6 of the report sets out the allocation of funding from the Community Safety Partnership for 24-25, a range of projects that were funded during the course of the past 12 months. And there's some detail around the amount that was awarded to each project, as well as a description of what that project involved. And then section 7 of the report outlines some further detail around the sort of projects and interventions that took place during the course of the 12-month period that this report covers. As you will see, there's a whole range of different activities, projects, areas of work that have been delivered over the course. And I'm happy to answer any questions around those, but I propose not to run through each of those in any great detail, because there's an awful lot of narrative in there. Just to finish, this year's funding for the CSP has reduced. So we had an approximate 20% reduction from the Police and Crime Commissioner's Office for 25-26. So that has led to some pressures around what that's able to then fund. Section 2.8 of the report outlines the recommended funding allocations for this current year that we are in. A lot of those are projects that we've historically funded through the partnership, but where it was oversubscribed, so where we haven't been able to fund projects, we've been working together to look at opportunities to secure additional funding and to support those wider projects. I'll stop there, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tom. I'll open it up to the floor. I've got Councillor Lawrence and Councillor De Serra.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom. I know night's getting on, so be as quick as possible. So the questions that I have mainly relate to the plan, the South Worcestershire Community Safety Partnership Plan for 2025-28 on page 131. I don't think you need to come to many of these meetings to realise that it's quite brief without wanting to be too critical. There are no sort of smart targets, it's not specific, and the RAG rating seems ambiguous. You know, what does the RAG rating mean in this context? So they don't seem so much, I'm not pinning this on you as an individual, because I appreciate this is a collective effort amongst Worcester City Council, Wychavon District and Malvern Hills District. This is a tri-council effort, so I'm not pinning it on you as an officer, but I can't leave this meeting without having mentioned this, because this isn't just, it's not about fun things, this is about crime and keeping people safe. And this 3-year plan, in my view, and I believe in the view of my colleagues, is not a plan, it's a list of words. So I would urge this to be revised amongst the 3 councils so that it has sufficient detail, so that this council and the people who live here are confident that the councils have a role to play in reducing crime. I appreciate that the funding settlement from the Police Crime Commissioner is only from 25 to 26, and this is a 3-year plan, so it's quite difficult to project for the next 2 years after this year. I do get that, but nonetheless I would like to see some detail. And maybe as part of the plan, if not this year but the following year, we could urge as 3 councils the Police Crime Commissioner to devote more money to the Dawn project, because I note that £47,000 has been allocated, and that's bearing in mind a 20% reduction for this coming year. £47,000 to the Dawn project. I believe that former councillor Mark Bayliss has been paid £50,000 as Deputy Police Crime Commissioner, so he's earning £3,000 more than the Dawn project will be receiving for a full year. Now, I'm happy to be corrected on those figures, but I do believe that is the salary for the Deputy Police Crime Commissioner. And I think as a council, we should be saying, come on now, people are suffering. We need more money for the Dawn project in particular. So can that be part of this plan? And can the plan in general have more detail? Because it's not a plan, it's a list of words. I'm sorry if that sounds harsh.
Yeah, I probably haven't made it very clear in the report. So the plan contained at Appendix 1 is a plan on page, so it's a summary document to outline the various different responses. So the prevent, prepare, protect, pursue is the sort of criminal justice approach to responding to issues. So it's just trying to capture at a glance, I suppose, the projects that sit within each of those themes against the priority areas set out in the thing. So yes, I accept it doesn't contain the detail that you might expect to see, but it's a sort of snapshot of the where the projects sit within against the priorities.
I think that's a really important clarification, and slightly embarrassed to assume that that was the plan. But that said, in order to scrutinise it, I think we ought to really have the full version. So, you know, I'm reassured massively by that. This is not the plan, but even so, I think we need to see that detail to pass it, if that makes sense. Sorry to sound like a bore.
Thanks, Councillor Lawrence. And Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. At page 127, 7.26, it's a point about the ward briefings that I've attended in the past. I just wondered, have I missed this year's? Because it seems like a long time since I attended one. And is there a timetable for them?
Yeah, so obviously reference this is referencing delivery during 24-25. So you're right to identify that there has been a drop of those. That's largely due to capacity and resources within the community safety team. We're really aware that they are and have been very valuable opportunities to share local intelligence and for us to receive that as well. So we haven't forgotten about them, and we recognise that they are very valuable. The challenge is sort of resourcing that, and certainly across the county, so across the city. So we're looking at how we can reintroduce those, but perhaps do it in a slightly different way.
Yeah, presumably the data's there, so maybe it's just a question of dishing it out if there's no one to present it, and we could ask questions where we need.
Thank you. Councillor Kinnersley.
Thank you, Chair. As the Worcester City rep on the PCC panel, which scrutinises the work of the PCC, I was very interested to read this report. It's really helpful to have that kind of broad, kind of wider view, what's happening at the tier sort of below, and to be able to kind of reconcile that with what I hear at the PCC panel meetings. I'm interested in sort of learning more about how joined up the different tiers are. You talk about a needs assessment, and I think you have clarified. One point I wanted to check in terms of that the needs assessment that you talked about is done at a local level, at the South Worcestershire level. Is that correct? Is that fed up? To kind of to sort of what are the lines of communication, if you like, of that local assessment in terms of influencing how resources are deployed at bigger scales? Thank you.
Yeah, so the strategic assessments are actually undertaken by a partnership analyst from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, and a contribution of funding that the CSP receives goes towards that post. So they produce a whole range of intelligence reports, which are reported through quarterly to the Community Safety Partnership. That involves sort of standard stuff, as well as we have the opportunity to request additional intelligence reports if there's an emerging issue or theme or concern, whether that's locally within one of the district councils or whether that's across the Community Safety Partnership area. So that information is shared across the partnership, and also feeds directly into the Police and Crime Commissioner's office as well. So yeah, it goes sort of both ways, I guess.
Great. Great. Okay, that sounds sensible. So it's the same kind of data set being carved up in different ways. I mean, on that point, at the there's a whole, as I'm sure you know, there's a massive sort of range of metrics which they do report on at that level. And I think picking up on my colleague's point about seeing a bit more detail on the annual report for the South Worcestershire organisation, it might be useful to kind of pick up on some of those metrics, because then you can start to kind of build that picture of, you know, how are we doing in relation to, you know, to other areas. Funding, I just wanted to ask about funding as well. So not surprisingly, you had a reduction this year. I think we're aware of the problems with the policing budget. And we was in the report to the meeting today, in terms of thinking of next year's allocation, have you heard anything for next year's allocation? I'm guessing you haven't.
No. No, we haven't heard any. I haven't had any clarification about funding for next year.
So, yeah, don't hold your breath, unfortunately, because the wording here is that the Ministry of Justice advised they are unable to provide a timeline for expected announcement, so they don't even know when they're going to be doing it. So that's not good news in terms of continuity of funding for these important organisations. Yeah.
Thanks. Do you want to take the opportunity, Alex, as you're our rep on the PCC, to give us a little report on your what your findings?
More than happy to. So, I mean, we're there to scrutinise the Police Commissioner, so we get a whole raft of information in terms of what he's been doing. And I've been trying to sort of cross-check what he's telling us in terms of what's coming out from South Worcestershire. And I think I need to do a little bit more of that. There's a timing difference. So this is 24-25. What we've been getting recently is in-year stuff. So that, you know, that might be useful just to kind of try and tie those two together. But just as a summary, the big thing, as you can imagine, in the last few meetings has been the budget issues. There's a massive budget deficit that they need to try and to meet. So obviously we're asking questions about the impact of that and how they're managing it and that sort of thing. So that very much dominates our conversations at the moment. We also today had a very interesting item on rural crime, actually, which is really direct good relevance to the South Worcestershire area, and that was a bit of a sort of a deep dive into that area. So that was interesting. One of the areas that comes up quite a lot, I think it is quite a favourite of the Police Commissioner, is safer roads, and I was interested in the report from South Worcestershire. It mentions towards the end of the plan the Road Peace campaign, and I think from the information from the PCC panel, Shropshire is very much leading the way in terms of making use of that campaign, and that may be an area where we could make more use. I mean, we will have all seen the news over the weekend. There were a horrendous number of fatal accidents. I mean, what was going on? It was, you know, terrible. It's a really, you know, kind of serious issue. So, and I believe that actually Worcestershire County Council is working with the PC and other councils as well, with a joined up approach, which is great to hear, because that's what we need: engineering, education, all those sorts of things. Yeah, so I mean, that's, as I say, that's each meeting we tend to kind of pick up on, you know, whatever we think is most kind of pertinent from the report. But there's no doubt that through this year and then going into next, it's going to be the budget process, how we manage the current year's budget, and then going forward into next year, how that's going to look. But more than happy to, if colleagues, you know, want to hear more or to feed things in, it's really helpful. All we have in the meetings to hear from is the Commissioner, so that's the person we're trying to be a scrutiny of, and we're only hearing from him at the moment, so that's clearly not the best way. Yeah, okay. So I feel I could do my job better if I can kind of have information and evidence from other sources. Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Councillor Kinnersley, just before you come in, Alan? How well is the scrutiny of the Pride Police Crime Commissioner at the PCC panel? Is it how yeah? So how is he been sufficiently scrutinised amongst the panel, or is he amongst friends?
I think we do our best. It's not always easy, I've got to be honest. As I say, we are presented information in certain ways, and we are starting to kind of challenge that and say that can we have data that allows us to do our job better. We recently had some training which was gave us some helpful understanding of what is our role. We are limited though, so I mean I regard it as similar, it's that sort of critical friend, sort of similar in a way to a governing body, but with the governing body they are part of the sort of offset approach, so they have teeth, they can sort of legitimately say we need this evidence in able to be, we don't have that with the PCC panel, so we are a bit limited as to what we can sort of work with. So that is a challenge, definitely. But I think you can say it gets robust at times, but we're not there to. I don't think it's in the interests of the setup for it to be, you know, a kind of a, you know, too much of a confrontational thing. It needs to. We need to be working together for the best of the of the region in a challenging way, which, as I say, yeah, but maybe more critical than friend, but yeah.
Thank you. I mean, it's a shame the press have just left. And actually, in terms of, I mean, we are getting a lot of complaints amongst councillors in terms of the lack of police response towards crime in our city, and especially serious incidents, and the amount of time it's actually taking time to serious investigations to even to happen in terms of that. And I think people across all wards are experiencing that, and councillors, just a lack of responsivity of the police in terms of certain circumstances, and often serious circumstances.
Just to clarify, that one of the challenges is that we are there to scrutinise the commissioner and not the police, and he's the one who challenges the police. So there is that slightly awkward kind of relationship. But even so, obviously that's the sort of thing that we do challenge him on. So.
Yeah, and finally, I mean, I think there is a point in terms of actually there's a bit of joined up thinking from the city's perspective. I mean, currently the chair or the vice chair of this committee serves on the South Worcestershire Community Safety Partnership, and of course the panel for the PCC is chosen by the county, and that's on political balance across the county, so you don't know who's going to end up from there. I mean, ideally, in an ideal scenario, you'd want the chair of the communities panel sitting on both of those panels, or some a representative, so there's that joined up thinking in terms of that. So maybe going forward, that actually, in terms of depending on when the meetings align, the South Worcestershire Community Matter, that we feedback that any useful information to you, etc., in terms of then you can go take that at a PCC level. Is that all right? Councillor Amos.
Joe, it's an interesting discussion because, as you will know, tomorrow the Police and Crime Commission, the Chief Constable, are coming to answer questions, if very generous of their time to come along to us. I mean, the problem with the Police and Crime Commissioner's office, Chair and colleagues, is frankly, it's a gravy train for failed Tory politicians who can't get elected to anything. They've all been trying to get elected to. They're doing this job, and then this year they're all trying to get elected to something. They've all failed, so they've all ended up back in their jobs on 20, 40, 50, 80,000. It's a scandal, frankly. But anyway, they're due for the chops soon anyway, because their function's going to be taken over by the strategic mayor. But what I would like to just raise as an issue is shoplifting. I mean, shoplifting is the fastest growing crime, and it is a crime at the moment. And I don't see any mention here. I don't see any activity from the Police and Crime Commission. Well, not legal, you know, police activity from the Police and Crime Commission office. I just find that extraordinary because it is damaging the high street. It is a serious crime. People are getting injured. I was recently, I won't name the exact shop, but it was a Tesco's. And I saw some people, actually, they were just nicking things. And I thought, well, they can't have this. So I was in there actually paying for something, you know. And I went up and I said, do you know that those three are, and they said, oh yeah, and they just gone out of the shop. And of course, the poor woman behind the counter went out and told the security chap standing there. And then he said, yes, we know them. They've just walked off, and they did nothing about it because he said there's one of me and there's three of them. And I felt so sorry for them. Workers, ordinary workers, and generally low-paid workers shouldn't have to be putting up with this kind of behaviour. They said, well, the police aren't going to come, so we won't bother to tell them. And that's appalling. because this is petty crime, you know, zero tolerance, which started in New York under Giuliani. Deal with the small things and the bigger things stop. But if they're not dealing with the small things, and I think it's disgraceful, and if I get the chance tomorrow, I've got some other questions to ask him. If I can get in, I will raise that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good point. And actually, that did I was at the last South Worcestershire Community Safety Partnership, and one of the most alarming demographic in the report that's coming out of there was the amount of race hate crime against security guards on the high street. And when I delved deeper into that, asking the community safety about what was the reason for that, and they specifically said because of the increase in shoplifting, when those people got specifically challenged or caught that they were being racist against the the security guards or the shopkeepers or the store workers as a result of that, and many people don't even are afraid to challenge them for obviously repercussions, etc. And I've seen it with my own eyes, people nicking stuff from TK Maxx or M&S and running out of the shop, and security guards kind of chasing them. It is something that we need to deal with, and it's affecting ordinary people on our high streets, and our shopkeepers are living in fear, absolutely 100%. And the police, and our bid is trying to step in to stop to do that. Why are we taking over the role of what the police should be doing? Absolutely. Thank you. Councillor Lawrenson.
Yeah, thank you. That conversation just reminded me, I mean, about far-right extremism. I mean, someone's just been convicted for, making bombs, essentially. A young white male. We've got here focus on young males regarding misogyny. Is it part of the Community Safety Partnership Plan to, over the next 3 years, to invest resources in tackling far-right extremism, and which is attached to a rise in hate crime towards minorities? Is that part of the strategy as it is, or is it something that needs to be added?
Yeah, so it's not a specific theme set out within the action plan over the course of the next few years. However, it's covered. So serious organised crime is covered as part of the work of the Community Safety Partnership. So yes, we had a very long discussion at the last Community Safety Partnership around some of the current issues that we were experiencing in Worcester and across South Worcestershire. So it's very much a live sort of topic of conversation, but it didn't form at the point of developing the undertaking the strategic assessment as coming through as one of those key priorities at that point in time. A lot of what it's based on is data. Taking the point around shoplifting, for instance, it would have been because at that point in time when the strategic assessment was undertaken, that didn't feature as a theme or a priority, which then fed through to the action plan. So that's kind of how it works. But clearly, things change between the time that the strategic assessment's undertaken and the action plan's developed. So it's obviously a moving beast, but it is very much a sort of live document.
Tom's mincing his words there. I was at that safety partnership and I hammered home the message, what we're collectively feeling at the moment in terms of the rise in hate crime and antagonistic behaviour out on the streets in terms of the whole current scenario. So, all right, hope that answers it. We go into closed session. There's no members of the public here, I don't believe. If you can